Imagine you are driving before sunrise through a cold wetland. A thin sheet of mist covers the flats like a scarf. The road is empty. Then the cabin goes dark. A huge shape skims the fog above the hood, like two paddles sliding across the sky. It is not a wind turbine. It is not a helicopter. It is a pair of flat antlers, each wide as a garage door, carried by a giant deer stepping across the road. If MEGALOCEROS, the so-called giant Irish elk, still lived beside us, how different would our world feel? They were not elk in the North American sense, not moose either. MEGALOCEROS was a true deer, a giant that walked across Europe and Asia during the last ice age. The signature was the rat, not narrow tines, but palmated antlers that spread like two fan palms. Males grew those fans every year, wore them like a billboard, then dropped them and started again with spring. The body stood near an adult's shoulder, heavy as a motorcycle. Thick neck, deep chest, long legs made from marsh and tall grass. These were open country animals. They liked wind and room, a skyline with nothing for antlers to snag. They were not monsters. They were grazers that lived by the quiet logic of grass. Roll time back a few thousand years. Ice pulls back and new meadows open. On wet soil, young grass and wildflowers thicken. A herd of MEGALOCEROS follows the water's edge and leaves low pencil lines across the green. In autumn, the air drums with the rut. Bulls call and answer. The flat antlers are not only beauty, they are a sign and a tool, balanced for side hits and shoves that sound like two oars clapping. Winter comes and the crowns drop. Crescents print the snow, and the cycle resets. The clock of that landscape is a clock a child could read without words. Now drop that herd into the 21st century. Maps crowd with roads, fences, power lines, golf courses, farms, and hobby drones. It feels like there is no room for an animal wearing two antennas 3 meters wide. But people are very good at learning. If this species returned, we would find ways to live with it because the trade is real. In return for space, we get the kind of place that breathes. We get open grass, clean edges, and a story that makes drivers pull over, switch off the engine and listen. Morning begins when the sky is still pale. Cows of the herd lead calves down to the water. They do not mow a lawn to the ground. They drift and trim, leaving low windows of light in the grass. Midday brings wind. The herd climbs a dry rise. They stand, groom, flick flies. In late light, young bulls practice with the new antlers, bumping like sparring partners. It is an ancient routine with modern benefits. Browsing keeps shrubs from choking wetlands. Moving herds hold natural fire breaks across dry grass. Seeds ride in fur and get dropped along the lines they walk. You could call it ecosystem engineering on hooves. The first conflict is the road. A 600 to 700 kilogram bull puts its shoulder at windshield height. A sudden crossing at dusk is every driver's nightmare. The answer is not taller fences. It is smarter routes. Wild bridges as wide as basketball courts. No low beams to catch antlers. Fences with springy rails and post spacing that lets a trapped rack turn free. Electronic signs that use GPS data to show when a herd usually crosses. In the traffic app, a gold window pops up. 5:30 to 6:10, herd moving to mineral lick, and drivers slow without drama. The second conflict is on farms. MEGALOCEROS loves salt and trace minerals. Instead of breaking fences to raid feed sheds, they can be pulled to the edge by design. Build salt stations at field margins. Give them a tall scratching post, a tray with approved minerals, and a simple motion camera that pings the owner if the herd strays too close to the barns. Over months, the paths stabilize, collisions drop, and the data flows to a community dashboard where farmers and biologists can read the same map. The third conflict is in parks. The rut is delicate. Rather than close the woods, managers can shift to long view watching. Set an observation hill 200 meters away. Add public binoculars. Stagger entry times and keep sound rules simple. The goal is not the closest photo. The goal is to feel a whole valley ring. It turns out people like that more. They pay not just to see a big animal, but to watch a landscape work on its original rhythm. There is even a small, clean economy around antlers that fall each winter. After the last cold snap, permitted volunteers walk set routes and pick up sheds only. No chasing. Back at a local shed house, each pair is weighed, tagged with place and date, and photographed. A portion becomes handcraft, knife handles, combs, buttons, folk instruments. Fine powder goes into biocomposite panels that replace plastic, the kind used in acoustic baffles, train handrails, and light furniture. Every item carries a short story. This came from the north bank of Glenmore Fen after a February gale. Anyone who touches it becomes the next audience to the meadow. Coexistence also means we learn to move slower. Nobody rides a megaloceros. Nobody yokes one to a plow. Deer skeletons are not built that way. What changes is our pace. Schools on the herd route take a field hour on the meadow. Kids kneel and notice grass tips snipped at a repeating height, like a ruler cut them. They hammer in bright reflector posts to replace barbed wire. They measure drainage ditches and discover why the channel should be wider than an antler span. In edge neighborhoods, streetlights shift to wildlife-friendly spectra. At truck washes, a new gate traps feed odors, so they do not call the herd to the lot. Small changes stack. More important, they teach each town that they share authorship of the view. Follow one day in the life of a warden. Call him Liam. At 5, he checks a scratching post and finds a dented antler caught on the top board. He gloves up, lifts it, lays it in a crate, and notes North Meadow, old rust stain, shedding begins. At 9, he dials a farmer across the fen. The herd will likely hit the east salt at 5. Move the hay wagon off the lane. At 4, he stands on the deck of the watch hill and whispers to a visiting family. If you hear a low drum, stay quiet. That is your lucky minute. At 6, the sun slides copper across the antlers. A row of kids holds its breath. One boy asks, "How is it that big?" Liam says, in words even smaller than the boy, "Because this place is big enough that it does not have to be small." Science is at your shoes, not just in a lab. Ecologists hide pressure sensors under a boardwalk plank to count steps. They sample droppings to see which seeds move with the herd. They fit drop-off GPS collars and build a map of antler roads over years. That map does not live in a drawer. It hangs on the wall of the community hall next to wedding photos, and a Little League schedule and a cafe menu. When a county plans to widen a road, the engineer looks at the red line, looks at the herd line, and asks if the project can slide 200 meters. More often than you think, the answer is yes. Etiquette is the real survival guide. Keep a respectful distance. Clip your dog on a leash. If the herd begins to cross, stop, cut the engine, let them pass. Remember that a shed antler is part of a public story, not a private trophy. Do not step into the center of a group for a close photo. Do not hover a drone over their heads. Pick up the loose fishing line you find at a culvert. Thin nylon loops are the #1 trap for any rat. Why try this hard? Because the return is not abstract. Open grass soaks rain better and lowers flash mud floods. Clearer marsh edges smell cleaner and make fewer mosquitoes. Biodiversity rebounds. Birds, insects, and flowers come back as if someone turned on a switch. Local economies get a new season. During the rut, families travel for a kind of natural concert. No cement stage needed. And when you find a sun-bleached shard of antler by a lane, you can tell the kid at your side that it is proof of a fair deal between people and the place they live. Now go back to that car on the morning road. The giant shadow slides once more over the hood. You know what to do. Ease off the gas. Lift your eyes. The great deer steps across in silence. Grass folds under a broad hoof like a polite handshake. When it clears the verge, the car stays still for a few extra seconds. Not from fear, from awe. You just watched a fragment of the past step into the present outside a museum, outside a screen, right in front of you. MEGALOCEROS, living with humans, is more than a biological thought experiment. It is a test of character. Will we make room again for things that are large and beautiful and not owned by anyone? If the answer is yes, The story already ends well before it begins because wind and grass and mud and those wide, flat antlers know how to tell their part without us.